Hello, welcome back. Okay, it's 2021 and we need to think about how we're going to pass our OET test. Even if you're thinking like right down the line, you're going to take this test in like 6 months or 3 months or 1 year, whatever. In this video, I'm going to share with you some top tips so you can pass your test in 2021. Now, below in the description, you're going to find a free downloadable goal setting PDF. So do check that out because if we want to attain our goals, we do need to set some goals, okay? Let's get started.
Yay!
Okay, there are 3 things that we need to consider in order to pass our OET test. So first one is, when are you going to take your test, right? You might be thinking of it again in a month or 3 months or whatever. Second critical thing you need to think about is, what score do you need? What do you need? Like a 350, a B? Do you need A's? Who knows? You need to find that out from the body that you're applying to. So for example, in Australia, APRA, they have certain standards and you need to find that out. Third thing you need to think about is, what is your current level of English? If you're aiming for a 350, for example, what are you now? Are you 350? Are you above it or are you below it? And if you're below it, how much time do you have to improve your score in order to get the grade that you actually need? Okay, let's get started and look at some of the tips. Let's start with the reading section and tip number 1, which is to grow your vocabulary. Okay, so as you are probably aware, the OET texts that you'll have to read, especially in reading part B and C, are medical-based texts. Now, that means that some of the words will be based on medicine, right? But like 98% of them will be general English language words, which you need to know. So how vast, how broad is your vocabulary? Because you'll need to consider building it out. Either you'll need to consider building out that general English language, like the high frequency words, or the medical English words as well. So you need to think about how you can build out your vocabulary. One of the things you can do is read, and while you're reading, you start to pay attention to words that you do not know, and you write them down and you become explicitly mindful of these words. So the next time you see it, you start to build it into your mind, okay? Building out a vocabulary is a time-consuming process, and if your vocabulary now is restricted or limited, you'll need to start building it out. Reading tip number 2, use the E2 language methods. One of the things that we're really good at is devising these step-by-step processes in order to answer the question correctly. This applies to reading as much as listening or writing or speaking. E2 Language's methods are excellent. They're all over on the platform on e2language.com. Some of them are on YouTube here. But for the reading specifically, you need to utilize these methods. Let's think about reading part A, for example, where you have 15 minutes to answer 20 questions. If that's the case, you need to be able to, on test day, move through that thing very efficiently. You need to know what you're looking at, and you need to know how to move from one question to the next accurately and efficiently. That's what the methods do. Okay, so let's set some goals for our reading scores. Don't forget to download the free goals PDF in the description below. So on a daily basis, you might want to think about reading a Science Daily article. You can find this at sciencedaily.com, and you can specifically search through the health section. That will help you because the readings that you'll see in reading part C specifically will be quite similar to the Science Daily articles. They're not going to be the same, but again, you're going to have to build up your vocabulary around these types of themes. Secondly, while you're reading, you might want to think about a summary for each of the paragraphs. So again, for reading part B or reading part C, a lot of the questions are about gist. Basically, what does this paragraph mean? What is the overall meaning of this paragraph? So while you're reading through this magazine article or Science Daily or whatever it is, start to think about, okay, what's the overall meaning of this paragraph? You can even write a single sentence summary for each paragraph. And you want to make this a habit. You want to do this on a daily basis. It'll take you 10 minutes, and that's going to help to build out your vocab. Now, on a weekly basis, you want to do some practice OET questions. One thing that I'll just caution you with is where you get your practice questions from. You might find some free OET materials on the internet. A lot of that stuff is complete junk, okay? It's not gonna help you with your OET test because the questions are so poorly written. Either there's gonna be multiple correct answers, or it's just too hard, or it's far too easy. Writing a good OET question is quite complicated. What I recommend for you is the official material from OET or the E2 language material, because we use ex-OET item writers. That is, people who used to write the actual exam now write the items for us. Also keep in mind that you might want to join our E2 language live classes that happen twice a day, 5 days a week, including a reading live class. Okay, so we just talked about reading and how you're going to set your goals and perform really well on the reading section on test day. Now let's turn our attention to the listening section. Listening tip number 1, understand how your mind works. Okay, this is kind of weird to say that, but testing your listening skills is actually really hard because you can't just, how do you test listening, comprehension? What happens on test day is you'll actually also be doing quite a lot of reading while listening. And there's certain things that your mind can and can't do. For example, one thing your mind can't do is listen and read at the same time. You can listen and then read, but you can't listen and read simultaneously. Understanding this sort of thing is really helpful. Or really what's helpful is the methods that E2 language has devised, because we've taken into consideration all of these different cognitive aspects. Also, check this out. So this is listening part C. And as I mentioned before, you cannot listen and read at the same time. But in listening part C, your mind has to do something quite crazy, which is flash read and flash listen. That is, you'll listen very attentively just for a few seconds, then you're going to read very quickly, and then you're going to go back to listening, and then back to the reading, and back to listening, etc. And it's pretty tricky. It's definitely something that you want to practice. Listening tip number 2, listen carefully to conversation transitions. Okay, let's think more about listening part C, because I think it's the most challenging part of the test. What you want to be able to do is listen to conversation transitions, or even if it's a monologue, if it's one person speaking, they're going to signal somehow when they're changing topic. And when they do that on your test paper, that's a change from the first question to the next question. Or if it's an interview, it's a lot easier because the interviewer will actually signal the change of topic. But you want to start to become much more conscious of when somebody's transitioning in conversation. You can do this in real life, of course, but again, during your practice, this will be very helpful. Okay, so let's set some listening goals for 2021. So what will you do on a daily basis to improve your score? You can watch TV shows, of course, and you can use subtitles if you really need to improve. Listening to podcasts is extremely helpful. And really, I think doing practice activities on E2 language is super helpful. On a weekly basis, you should be trying to listen to a podcast and read the transcript. Okay, so there are lots and lots of health podcasts out there. Find one that you find interesting and just listen to it on a weekly basis, okay? Okay, so we just chatted about how to improve your listening skills. And if we think about what listening is, it is the comprehension of spoken English. So what's spoken English? We'll talk more about this in the speaking section coming up. But very briefly, in order to get better at listening, you need to understand how spoken English works and all of the different components, including the sounds that native English speakers make, as well as the different aspects like intonation and sentence stress, etc. This all contributes to the meaning of what they're saying. Okay, cool. We've spoken about that. Now let's talk about the writing section. But before we do, if you're not yet a subscriber to this YouTube channel, click that subscribe button because we produce great videos that will help you out periodically as you're going towards your test. Writing. Writing tip number 1. Read high-quality model letters. All right, so if you're unaware of how OET writing works, you're going to have to write a referral, a transfer, or a discharge letter. If you're a doctor or a nurse, there's some other types of letters for different professions, but that's basically it. And it's not an essay, so it's very different to IELTS or PTE or TOEFL, for example. It's very much its own structure, its own format. And the best way to get, well, this isn't quite true. One of the ways to get better at writing is to read high quality model letters so you get a sense of structure. Structure is really critical, okay? One of the places where you can find high quality model letters is on e2language.com. Writing tip number 2, improve your grammar and vocabulary. Okay, so this kind of seems like an endless task because grammar is really confusing and vocabulary is just massive. There's so many words out there. Again, what I spoke about for reading is you need to build out that fundamental vocabulary, the general English vocabulary. You also need to start paying attention to the grammatical errors that you make. You may want to think about getting feedback, or you might want to check out e2school.com's grammar review course, which is free, okay? You need to be aware of when to use this particular verb tense, when to use a singular noun like headache versus headaches, little things like that, and prepositions. Is it in the skin? Is it on the skin? Is it under the skin? Etc. So you need to become aware of those grammatical rules in English that also combine with the vocab so you can write a good, flexible, accurate letter. So let's set some goals for writing. On a daily basis, you might want to study grammar review on e2school.com. It's free. And you also want to start paying attention to grammar. That is, if you don't know when to use a plural noun, find out when to use a plural noun and start improving it. On a weekly basis, you can come and attend our E2 Language live classes where we go through all of this stuff and we talk to you about vocabulary building and grammar, and we look at model letters. It all happens in the live classes taught by expert teachers on e2language.com. Okay, let's talk about speaking. Speaking tip number 1, understand what speaking is. Okay, so I mentioned this briefly in the listening section that in order to improve your listening, you should understand what spoken English is. And in order to improve your speaking, you should also understand what spoken English is. What does it consist of? What are the ingredients of speaking? What is a native English speaker doing when he or she says something? Okay, and how do they say it? Because it probably differs from your first language. So we've got different elements of spoken English. You've got the sounds, the consonants, the consonant clusters, the short vowels, the long vowels, the diphthongs, which are the multiple vowels. So you've got like the p and the pr and the a and the a, for example. These are the different sounds that you make. They're critical. But the next step then is to think about the what's called prosody, which sort of glues it all together, which could include things like the connected speech, the intonation, the pausing, the rhythm, how the meaning is conveyed through these different elements. You need to become aware of those things. Now, in the description below, we'll post some speaking science videos, which will make you aware of those different aspects of spoken English. Speaking tip number 2, study the OET speaking criteria. Okay, so we've talked a lot about language skills during this entire video, and of course they're critical. OET is first and foremost an English language test. However, in the speaking section, yes, you'll be graded on your fundamental language skills, but you'll also be graded on what's called the clinical communication criteria. That is your bedside manner. That is how you act or behave with the, not really behave, how you respond to the patient, okay? And these things, these criteria, you can definitely improve your score if you understand what it is the OET examiners will be listening for, okay? And if you can include that in your speaking, you're going to improve your OET speaking score, okay? So understanding the OET speaking criteria, that is how you're scored, is critical. And it's the exact same thing with writing. How you're scored, or the criteria, is critical for that as well. You might be a native English speaker and rock up to your exam with no practice and think, this will be easy, I'm a native English speaker, and you might get a poor score because you haven't included that clinical communication criteria. So just be careful. Okay, let's think about setting some speaking goals on a daily basis. I think reading aloud is really critical, especially if you're living in a country where you don't speak English on a daily basis. Think about signing up to Speaking Lab on e2school.com to improve your pronunciation, the core sounds, the consonants, the vowels, the consonant clusters. Now, if you want to learn about the speaking criteria, you should join the E2 Language Live speaking classes because we go through it with you. Cool, that's it. So if you're taking your OET test in 2021, you need to start thinking about it now and you need to start setting some goals. As I mentioned before, that PDF in the description below is free and it's downloadable. You might want to fill it out and stick it on your fridge. You want to slowly, incrementally work towards the goal or the score that you need. Now, if you have any tips, pop them into the comments below so we can read them. I'd like to take a look at them. Otherwise, keep practicing. I'll see you soon.